how.
Right.
Well, in our conversations, Doug, we've talked about three catalysts for kind of personal evolution. And one of those that we've spent a lot of time, several programs talking about, is emotional intelligence.
Right.
And another one, which we'll touch on a little bit today, is flow. And then the third is strengths, and we will get into that a little bit today. But this idea of flow, this is a word that we use quite a bit, but not real often within the context of organizational leadership or the professional life. But we've also heard people talk about being in the zone. And athletes talk about that a lot.
Right.
Artists sometimes talk about kind of being in that state. Is there anything in your life that you do where you really find yourself in the zone?
Well, I like to use this illustrative point when my boys were very young, and I had what I found out to be a very annoying habit with my sons, and to some degree with my wife, and that was that I would come home from a day's worth of work at whatever level or whatever position I had in the early years of my boys, and I would come in, say hi to everybody, grab the newspaper, and sit down wherever and start reading. And the house could burn down around me, and I wouldn't know what was going on, and I wasn't engaged with my boys, and I wasn't engaged with my wife, and so it was always about an hour's worth, and I sort of, in my mind's eye, thought that was decompression, until one day I was reading the newspaper, and my oldest son sneaked in behind me and smacked the paper out of my hands, scared me. And I jumped, and he says, "Dad, why?" He says, "You're not paying any attention to us." So zoning out in this case, because I was zoned out, and I wasn't aware of what was going on around me. And so in that particular case, what was taking place was that I didn't know what, I didn't engage with my sons, was not engaging with what needed to be done at the house, and with my wife. And so I stopped that. I mean, that was the last time that ever happened. But you can be in the zone in a very positive way, in that you are one with the music, just like Gillian, and dancing and into the flow. And when that happens, you can be very productive. You can be, time passes without you realizing how much time takes place. But I think it's something that we don't talk about, and we know that in the workplace, in the organization with which we find ourselves there 5 days a week, if not longer, maximizing and figuring our way, how do we get into the flow that is the most productive for us and the team with whom we're working.
Well, in 1979, Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi.
Oh, I love that word.
He ended up publishing his doctoral dissertation, and it was focused on this idea of flow. And what it was interested in was optimal functioning. What are those ingredients that are necessary for a person to function at their best? And he did an extensive research study to look at this, and there were a couple of things that he found out about people that are in the zone. One is that whatever they're doing is autotelic in nature. If something is exotelic, the emphasis is upon the product, the outcome. If something is autotelic, it's focused upon the process. And so for, you mentioned reading, maybe a person might be studying for an exam.
Right.
While they want to do well on the exam, if the activity is autotelic, it's actually the process of reading or preparing that provides them with a great deal of stimulation and engagement. And so it's the process rather than just the end result that's the emphasis here. Another aspect of it is that the activity is challenging. There's a very delicate balance where the difficulty of the task and the propensity for success They're very balanced.
Balanced, right.
Yes. And another aspect of flow, according to Csikszentmihalyi, is it's almost a mystical experience where a person is so involved with what they're doing, they become one with that task. And they almost lose their sense of self as they're being involved in that. And Csikszentmihalyi, he said that people that are experiencing flow, he says this. He said people describe their thoughts and actions when they are in the context as spontaneous and effortless, even though what they are doing is often difficult and risky. But at the time it feels as natural as being carried by the flow of a river, a process which does not require effort or control. Daniel Pink, whom you are familiar with, he said if people are conscious of what puts them in flow, they'll have a clear idea of what they should devote the time and dedication to master. And those moments of flow in the course of pursuing excellence can help people through the rough parts. And
I think that both of those statements are enlightening, and we know that from a theoretical organizational standpoint that has great meaning, but everybody, regardless of what they do, can find themselves in a flow state. And it's really interesting when you begin to work with organizations and individuals within organizations to figure out what is the thing that makes them, I'm going to use a common term called tick, what makes them tick. And one of the things that happens is that when we find you have an organization that's in a flow state, you have efficiencies, you have productivity, you have clarity, you even have creativity that you may not otherwise have. And I think about some of our great modern inventors, and Steve Jobs, Bill Gates, and when you look at some of the statements and work and from their writing, is that when they first started developing some of the machines that we use in the information technology world today, they said that they would work 6 and 7, 12, 15 hours a day, and it would be dark and they'd forget to eat. And so that's really when you are peaking. And it's really interesting to see how those successful organizations, and it doesn't have to be for a profit, there are other things that motivate people. It doesn't have to be always the dollar. And so it can happen any place if the flow is allowed to be a part of the process of functioning.
I mean, you really said it there. I mean, it's not so much about about the job being altered. It's about the way in which the job is executed.
Right.
And if you are able to incorporate flow into how you do your job, there's a great likelihood that you will work harder, you will stay in the organization longer,
right.
You will be more creative, and you'll be a lot more satisfied with what you're doing.
Well, you know that one of the things that we do when we're working with organizations is that healthy organizations want to retain their employees. They want to retain their students if they're a school, a college, university. And one of the things that you want to make sure that you do is that you do it in such a way that they come back, and so that we know that one of the highest cost ratios that is a negative is turnover and attrition with employees, because for every time you lose an employee, what do you have to do, Tony?
You've got to train them.
You've got to train the new person, and it's not cheap. Right.
One of the things that Csikszentmihalyi did during his research was he had people back in the 70s and 80s wear some kind of a device, and at random intervals during the day it would beep, and they would have to write down what they were doing at that time, and he would help them then decide later, what were they doing when that occurred. And he did this to find out how much they were being engaged in that flow state while they were working. And there's a book that he wrote called Good Business that actually translates some of these concepts into a professional context.
Right.
And rather than providing a lot of really practical tools for managers, which would be nice, he does kind of more more or less pose questions that managers could ask about this. But you know, one of the things I would ask our viewers to think about is, you know, and Daniel Pink wrote some of this, you know, which moments in your life, in your work, produce feelings of flow? Where were you when they were happening? What were you working on? Who were you with? Are there certain times of the day that are more flow friendly than others? How could you restructure your day based on your findings? How might you increase the number of optimal experiences and reduce the moments when you feel disengaged or distracted? If you're having doubts about your job or career, what does this exercise tell you about your true source of intrinsic motivation? I think these are great questions. You know.
Well,